You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Seattle parents angry and upset as graffiti makes their city seem like a war zone. I've talked about this, not in length, but it's kind of like, it's just one of those really annoying things when you've got normal architecture, maybe a cool building, maybe you got a cool walkway, you've got a cool overpass, something like that. I appreciate those things in a city, especially a city like Seattle that's got backdrop that's super beautiful. And then it's all tagged up with graffiti. It's just a terrible look. I don't care what you say about urban art. It is not a good look when your city is tagged up. And right now, Seattle, large swaths of it, just tagged up. You go up I-5 or you go down I-5 to Portland, same thing. You know, overpasses, underside of the overpass. You just got a bunch of graffiti. It's like they just can't help themselves. Blank canvas, I must paint. You know, I must have the world see my art. Well, it looks terrible. It's awful. So we're going to walk through. This is a Fox News article because let's be honest, Fox is one of the few media outlets that will cover something like graffiti because it kind of indicates things aren't going all that great. And the vast majority of the media, they just want to ignore this kind of thing. It's graffiti. It's always been there. It's just, nah. I've lived in Seattle my entire life with the exception of a few months here and there elsewhere. But for the majority of my life, I've been here 53 years. And Seattle's gotten way worse. It's gotten way worse. The stuff I'm reading about, news stories that I'm covering, just driving around, it's like, oh, yeah, this is not good. So, all right, let's dive into graffiti of all things. Residents of Seattle shared concerns about demoralizing graffiti as a mobile app captures the urban scrawl. Yes, we have a mobile app where you can take a picture, send it in. Maybe somebody will come out and do something about your graffiti, but there's graffiti all over Seattle. And if you look at any of these places where that happens often, there's just layer after layer after layer of covered over paint. Even here in the east side where I live, close to where I live, on one of the main drags, 156th Avenue Northeast, it's got some Antifa graffiti. Drives me crazy. I want to catch them and not have them do that in the future. Let's just say that. Yeah. It's annoying. And then you've just got some tags that are like, what? Penmanship was not your gig in school, was it? Because even with a can of spray paint, you can't, I don't even know what you're saying. So like gray skies and rainfall, graffiti in the city of Washington is ubiquitous today. Defaced public and private property can be seen everywhere. Storefronts, apartment buildings, commercial vehicles, highways, bridges, street signs, and recycling bins all bear the urban scrawl. Nothing is spared. Everything appears to be fair game, including magazine display racks, utility poles, even historic sites. Taggers apparently do not discriminate. They have tagged some of the, the real art throughout the city, and oftentimes, they don't know. They're not either from here or they just don't care. I think it's a lot of just, this is the blank canvas again. Why wouldn't I? I'm an artist. Why wouldn't I populate the world with my art? All right. So, Banksy, that's one thing. That guy is a crazy good artist. And he typically tags on stuff that, is probably literally fair game. But Banksy's a different story. He's like a real artist. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's this, he's a graffiti artist who literally, you look at some of his stuff and go, whoa, that is so cool. I mean, it is actual art. The vast majority of what we see here it's just graffiti. It's people just, I'm going to tag whoever I'm affiliated with or my gang or whatever doing that stuff. And it just looks horrible. It's the bad look. It's a terrible look. Let's be reasonable, right? So, okay, let's keep going here. Now, concerned parents and other residents are speaking out about the graffiti overgrowth. Graffiti is not some dude writing, Jim was here, says Ari Hoffman, Seattle resident and parent of 3 children, told Fox News Digital. Graffiti is about marking territory by gangs or dealers or even by people living on the streets who are being used for criminal activity. Let's cover that one again. You got gangs, you got dealers, and you got people living on the streets who are being used for criminal activity. All right. So what Ari Hoffman is saying, okay, any which way, whoever's writing this stuff, it looks horrible. It's a horrible, horrible look. And just a few miles away from Seattle, where I'm sitting, we don't really have an issue with that. And in my opinion, the reason is if some of those people get caught, they're going to do some jail time. There's going to be consequences. There's going to be something like graffiti. It's a misdemeanor and you're probably going to get a fine. But our police here, they're not going to take this lightly. We are not a society just outside of Seattle. There are cities that take law enforcement seriously. So, you can make all of the arguments you want about, well, it's a big city. It's got big city problems. There's a lot of areas where this is not acceptable. And there will be consequences if you get caught doing this ridiculous nonsense. So Ari Hoffman is host of the Ari Hoffman Show on Seattle's KVI AM 570, and he's a former candidate for the Seattle City Council. 𝒆𝒂𝒕𝒍𝒆, a mother of two and a Seattle homeowner, told Fox News Digital, Seattle has chosen to punish its residents who desire to live peacefully and respectfully with their neighbors and decided to stop enforcing rules, policies, and laws. That, you might say, well, that's Fox. They're always taking the really conservative approach. That is literally what's going on. I've talked about going up to Aurora, Highway 99. There are at least 3 or 4 YouTube channels that literally just drive down the road and show how many working girls there are, pitching their wares from the sidewalk on the street, just walking up and down the street, just blatant as anything. I mean, it's crazy. So we have literally stopped enforcing, laws and rules. And a lot of that has to do with we defunded the police, and you've got to go to a priority crime system where only the, people really getting impacted are going to be dealt with because the rest of it don't have the bandwidth to cover it. So police are doing the best they can. I had an interesting statistic come out of the Portland Police Bureau that they are doing about 200 arrests a month. They're doing 200 arrests a month in Portland. And the Portland District Attorney and the attorneys handling these arrests, they are city attorney, I think it is, because Portland Police, not county. And so the attorneys handling these 200 arrests, they're prosecuting maybe 2 or 5 per week. 2 to 5 per week. So break that down. 45 plus cases a week basically get dismissed in Portland. The vast majority of all the cases get dismissed in Portland. Same thing in Seattle. We do the same thing in Seattle. So why wouldn't people do this if they know they're going to get away with it? Shoplifting, same thing. Hey, we've only got enough bandwidth to cover certain segment of, crimes that happen. The rest of it, well, if people get away with it, they're going to get away with it. And they are. So this is ongoing. And it drives me crazy when people say the shoplifting is due to people they're hungry and they need a sandwich. That's just such nonsense. It's not reasonable and it's ridiculous. That's what it is. I mean, just to try and convince me that somebody is, like I talked about yesterday on this podcast, I ran into a shoplifter with a full cart of stuff at Home Depot, got in a tussle with the manager, and the manager basically held his ground and held the shopping cart. This happened literally right in front of me when I'm walking into Home Depot in Bellevue here. And the manager won. Vicious shoplifter 0. We're going to start keeping tabs of all these, crime events that are just going on around us. And, if you're somebody who follows the law and wants to try and be a better person and wants people around you that help you live your life, you see this stuff and you see graffiti and you see these shoplifters and you're like, what is going on? Is the fabric of our society is it that fragile? And is it just, unwinding in front of us? Kind of feels that way sometimes, right? And so when you go across either 520 from Bellevue, where I am, Or you got to go across I-90 to get to Seattle because we've got this enormous Lake Washington separating us, it's an amazing lake. I spend a lot of time on that lake in the summer, and it's an amazing lake. But you drive across this freeway system, either to the north or to the south. They're only a few miles apart. And you cross over the bridge, and it's like you're in a different world. Everything is tagged up. It's kind of grimy. You got homeless people just everywhere. It's this different world. And so you can't tell me, well, it's all this way, because it's not. It's how the city handles things. And in Seattle, we've just let graffiti go. So residents must clean up garbage and vandalism in their own neighborhood, she also said. This is the parent. Got to clean up your own clean up garbage and vandalism in the neighborhood. And then you take it a step further and you've got, good citizens like Andrea Suarez of We Heart Seattle. She's literally going out with her nonprofit and picking up hundreds of thousands of pounds of trash from our homeless encampments. I mean, what are we even doing? It's kind of like, what, how did, this is 2022. I thought things were going to get better. I thought things were going to get better as we got more advanced. Seems like we're regressing, doesn't it? I mean, does it feel like that? Residents must also pay for property damage created by those who don't want to be part of any community, she said. Skolas and her family live near the University of Washington, so the U District. The U District is particularly horrific right now. It's just kind of anything goes. And I've watched the homeless encampments, the tents, there's these individual tents. They're just popped up everywhere. And it's dangerous. I mean, it is dangerous. After dark, that's not the place you want to be. And this is our biggest university in the state, the University of Washington, an enormous campus and an enormous number of people that go to school there. This is our higher education. Interesting, right? I mean, Christine Villani, a 30-year resident of Seattle, said that she too has noticed an increase in graffiti over the past couple of years. I find it demoralizing and I feel like I live in a war zone, she told Fox News Digital. It sounds to me that nobody cares, anything goes. And that's kind of what it feels like. Now, some people are going to say, Seattle's quirky, just like Portland. Okay. But that doesn't mean it has to be tagged up. Well, we've always been a little odd. We've always been a little different here. And, you're going to need to deal with us warts and all. Well, yeah, you don't need to be tagged up. I mean, that's a hard no-go in my book, but it's kind of part and parcel with everything else. When you just let things go, it's okay. Love your fellow human being. Just let it happen. It's all right. They'll do better next time. And they don't. They just tag up more stuff. Villani lives near the Capitol Hill neighborhood close to downtown. This area was the site of the ill-fated CHOP neighborhood, or Chaz, during the notorious 2020 Summer of Love. Riots, as then Mayor Jenny Durkan called them, later walking back that description. Yes, she certainly did. The Summer of Love, I mean, that's sad event when you are, it's a racial protest and you have two black teenagers lose their lives to gunfire. I mean, that is literally what the Summer of Love ended up being, and not good. That is not good. Those are kids. Those are kids that got killed. Any which way you look at that. So the graffiti, Villani also told Fox News Digital, is an invitation to crime and more degradation in the environment. I don't think enough is being done, and this contributes to the increasing dystopia that is Seattle now, she said. And I have watched this. I've watched this on multiple fronts of just like areas that I know, areas that I used to appraise in heavily. I'd be throughout Ballard all the time. And these are Norwegian like fishing communities of Seattle, because that's what Seattle used to have a lot of. And so you've got Ballard, you got Fremont, you got the U District. I went to school there. I lived there. And it was always a little grimy. I mean, it was always a little different, but Seattle, it's an older part of the Pacific Northwest. So it's got some, what in the real estate industry we call physical depreciation. And now we've got societal depreciation kind of ongoing. So more graffiti reported since COVID-19. That seems to me everything bad kind of went more in COVID, right? Because I think it was like the gloves are off. Anything goes. Police aren't going to be they were busy handling all that other craziness, and now they're busy trying to play catch up with depleted numbers. And anybody who tells you different is just, it's going to be okay. Well, if we have an event, we'll just bring in police officers on overtime. Yeah, you need like 500 cops more in both Portland and individually in Seattle. You need like 500 more cops to kind of just get us back to even to where we need to be. That's not going to happen for a long time. And one of the, I think it was a King County Council member, they were saying, well, here's how we're going to, solve the King County sheriff problem. Don't have enough deputies. Here's how we're going to solve that. We're going to do a $15,000 lateral signing bonus. Well, Seattle already does what? I think 25,000. And guess what? There are virtually no law enforcement personnel that are just floating around out there looking for a job. There's none. So when you say that, you're just blowing smoke, because it's not going to happen. None of these communities are going to have that many police come on anytime soon. It's a long-term process. And so you're going to have graffiti for a long time, because if you're going to try and fight back and get some people on the ground fighting this kind of stuff, got to have more cops. It's unless you're going to throw out the graffiti patrol. I don't know what they're going to do. Unarmed. Yeah. Right. Good luck with that. So a lot of this stuff, I think, it's going, and its momentum carries it. And so you see a lot of these areas of Seattle. You see downtown, you see the cool parks, and you're like, oh, this would be awesome, except for all that, just that filth of people, tagging up who they are and what they're doing. And it's like, all right. Yeah. While the app was launched in 2013, it pairs the need for this reporting tool along with a graffiti report phone line that any resident can call is greater now than before. There's been an increase in graffiti reports since the beginning of the COVID-19. So we know that. And what the city says, they give advice on, well, if you got a planter, just basically I'm paraphrasing what the rest of the article is. If you've got a planter and you don't have any plants hanging over it, and that part of your planters inside of the planters getting graffitied, why don't you plant some plants and get some anti-graffiti paint on whatever walls are getting, and, take pictures for your insurance purposes. And then like you're going to call insurance on graffiti. I mean, are we dumb here? You start reporting graffiti on your homeowner's insurance policy. That's not going to work. That's not going to be a step in the right direction. You're going to handle that stuff yourself. So it's just this ongoing craziness. The city is like, use anti-graffiti paint. Okay. How about we, for a while, we just say, well, you get caught doing graffiti in Seattle, you're going to do an automatic 6 months in jail. What about that? How about that? You get, something. You got to do something. 2 months, a month. Just make it painful. Throw these people in jail. It's what we need to do. Well, we need to have enough law enforcement to be able to handle the big crimes, the medium crimes, and this kind of stuff, the graffiti, because it's just going. It's just happening. And it's going to keep going. It's like a little kid who, they take their freedom and they're just going to push. Well, let's see how far mom and dad will let me take this. Well, I'm going to do this. Well, nothing happened last time. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to, whatever it is that they're doing. They're pushing the envelope, right? That's what kids do. That's what criminals do. And that's what criminals are doing in Seattle. And they are doing it to the point where people are saying, you know what? Enough is enough. But what are the consequences? There are so many more things more important and probably higher on the totem pole of priority than graffiti. But then there's the rub. There's that full circle, right? If you can't deal with it on the micro level, the macro level, anything goes. I was reading a story about people abandoning their kids and their kids having to live in hospital emergency rooms because the emergency rooms, deem these kids not bad enough to need to have full-time psychiatric help. So they can't really send them to the environment they probably should be in. Then there's no room for them anywhere. So some of these kids that have been dumped off by parents who can't handle them, maybe the kid's got some kind of mental problem where he's, injuring his siblings, things like that. Maybe the parents lost a job. They just physically can't take care of their kids, so they drop them off at the ER. Some of these kids have lived in the ER for like a month, 60 days. They're like in a room. They're not really going outside because they don't want them to run away. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff like this going on. So graffiti, yeah, it's bad, but it's not the worst of our problems, unfortunately. But it's kind of a sign of everything else, just not where it should be. Now, we do have new mayor in Seattle, and he's vowed to do some things towards that. He's vowed to take a harder stance on crime. We're just going to have to, the article goes on here to say, Mayor Harrell has made clear his commitment to addressing graffiti. Well, without the bandwidth to do that, as far as law enforcement goes, what are you going to do? You're going to have a graffiti crime patrol? Maybe you are. Maybe you do that. Maybe you get some citizens involved who are just anti-graffiti, pioneers. They're just out there. They're graffiti vigilantes. I mean, do we need that? Apparently we do. It's wild, right? You think that you're doing everything you should be doing, and you're kind of just running along, living your life and doing your thing. And then you start experiencing some of this stuff and like, what happened? What happened? Where did we go sideways? That's what we're talking about here in the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. News for reasonable people. All right. Thanks for being here. That's it. That's all I got. There's a bunch of other stuff, but it's depressing. So I'm not going to read it. It's just like, there's graffiti in Seattle. It's an issue. It doesn't look good. It looks horrible. All right. So that's it. That's my graffiti discussion today. Graffiti 101. Ugh. Wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I didn't have to do a lot of these stories because they're just like an admission of, wow, that's not good. Interesting. All righty then. We'll catch up soon. Thanks again for being here. Thanks again for supporting Seattle Real Estate Podcast. We'll talk soon. Bye for now.